Welcome to Deep Sleep Story. Tonight you'll journey through a peaceful, medieval tale about two travelers seeking knowledge, purpose, and inner peace. Settle in, let the world fall away, and allow the road to Emberwick to carry you into restful sleep. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy these gentle adventures. Now, let's begin. Mira, the leaving. The scent of boiled linen hung in the evening air. It clung to the rafters of the sewing room, where Mira stood near the corner shelf, carefully folding her second shirt. The light from the western window spilled over her shoulders, soft gold against the wool of her cloak. She didn't look back. Behind her, her mother sat hunched over a tangle of dark blue thread, eyes sharp, mouth thin. "You packed that salve wrong," she said. Mira turned. "It won't break. Doesn't matter. You'll never find it when you need it." Her voice wasn't harsh, but it carried the weight of a dozen half-spoken fears. Mira stepped to the table and began unrolling the bundle again. "I'll move it." Her mother said nothing, just watched her, and then finally whispered, "You don't have to go." Mira didn't answer. "You could work here, or in Westmere. Start your own booth, sell tinctures with the rest of the half-learned healers." "I don't want to guess anymore," Mira said. "I want to know." Thea, her mother, sighed. She reached for a small ceramic jar near the herbs. "Then take this." She unscrewed the lid. "For burns, bites, or bruises you don't want to explain." Mira smiled, but her fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the jar. "Thank you. I used that on your father's ribs when he tried to climb the town wall drunk." "That explains a lot," Mira said quietly. They both chuckled, and the tension in the room loosened. A moment later, Thea stepped away from the table and reached for a narrow drawer near the wall. She opened it carefully, hands slow, reverent. From inside, she drew a small silver thimble, bent at the edge, warm from years of touch. She pressed it into Mira's palm. "This has mended every coat I've owned, and every mistake I didn't know how to fix." Mira looked down at it. "I'm not a tailor." "No," her mother said, eyes soft now. "But your hands are gentle." "That's enough." Mira nodded. Then came the quiet. The kind that holds itself tight around the ribs. She slipped the thimble into her pouch, fastened the flap, and picked up her bag. "All right. I'll worry. That's part of the deal." Her mother opened the door without a word. The light outside was pink and gold. Rowen, the turning. The forge was cooling when Rowen entered the workshop, but the stones still breathed heat. The scent of iron and oil clung to the air. Hooks held tools like waiting soldiers, lined in precise rows across the walls. The window was cracked, enough for the wind to whisper through. His father stood near the bench, running a cloth along the lathe chisel. He didn't look up. "You're early." Rowen set his bag beside the stool. "Didn't feel like pretending longer." Silence. His father placed the chisel down, precisely. "The Avrith army doesn't need dreamers." "I'm not dreaming. You think they'll teach you how to hold a sword in Emberwick? That old hill town with more goats than soldiers?" Rowen didn't reply. "You're a good craftsman," his father continued. "Not great, but steady. We could have expanded by next year." Rowen lifted a worn cloth roll from his pack. His own tools, his own edge stone, his name carved into the leather. "I don't want to shape pieces for other men's war machines. I want to hold something real." His father stepped closer. "Steel is real." Rowen met his eyes. "Not when it's meant for someone else's hands." Another silence. Then, slowly, the old man reached into the back drawer and withdrew a small whetstone. It was pale, nicked at the edge, nearly used through. He offered it without a word. Rowen took it. They didn't say goodbye. The door clicked softly shut behind him. The field. The road bled into wild land by the time the sun dipped low. Mira adjusted the strap of her pack as she stepped out of the wooded trail and into a wide field. The grass here was taller than her knees, golden green and tipped with seed. Wind moved through it like breath. The path was hardly more than twin tracks, one for carts, one for boots. But it was clear, and it pointed south. She didn't expect to see anyone. So when she caught sight of a figure near a crooked willow, she stopped. The man was sitting on a flat stone, sharpening something, a knife, or maybe a short blade, with long, patient strokes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a simple pack at his side. The edge of a whetstone gleamed between his fingers. Mira stepped forward, boots brushing the grass. He looked up at the sound. They studied each other for a breath. "Evening," she said. "Evening," he replied, neutral. "You headed south?" "I am." "Where to?" "Emberwick." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "You too?" He gave a shallow nod. Mira hesitated, then shifted her pack off her shoulder and sat cross-legged a few paces away. Not close, but not far. The wind rustled again. "You training?" she asked. "Trying." She looked at the blade in his hands. "You don't hold it like someone new." "I'm not new with tools. Just with this one." She nodded. They sat in silence for a while. The sun dipped lower. Finally, she asked, "Why Emberwick?" He didn't answer at once. Then said, "Because someone said it's the kind of place where you can start becoming something better." Mira considered that. "Better than what?" He glanced at her. "Than what I am." She didn't press. And when the sky turned indigo, they built a small fire between them, not for warmth, but for company. She unwrapped a heel of bread. He shared a wedge of dried fruit. And when it came time to sleep, they didn't speak of safety. They simply rested, two people on the same road, not yet friends, but no longer alone. Morning came slow and silver. Mira woke first, lying beneath a low willow whose branches had whispered all night. Dew had gathered along the hem of her cloak. Her shoulders ached. But her mind was quiet, like the world had paused to let her rise before it began again. Rowen sat nearby, already up, sharpening the same blade on a flat stone beside the embers of their fire. Either of them spoke right away. Not from awkwardness. Just rhythm. The road grew thinner after the field, winding through low hills where trees leaned close on either side. The air smelled of damp earth, morning moss, and horses that hadn't passed in days. Rowen walked slightly ahead, not out of dominance, but habit, like someone used to checking for unstable ground. Mira didn't mind. She was busy thinking. Each had shared almost nothing the night before. Names, yes. Directions, yes. But not truths. They hadn't needed to. Yet. By midday, they reached the river. It wasn't wide, no more than 30 paces across, but the current was strong, and the banks were steep and pitted from years of rain. The bridge that once spanned it stood crooked now, its central planks missing, the supports leaning like tired knees. "Damn," Rowen muttered. Mira walked to the edge. "Looks like someone tried to fix it and gave up. Or didn't want it fixed," he said, eyes narrowing. There was a tent pitched on the far side, under the trees. Smoke rose gently from a pipe beside it. And seated by the posts, straight-backed, arms folded, was an old man in partial armor, polished but worn. A blade leaned beside him, upright in the ground. He watched them. And waited. They called across the gap. "Rowen, is there another way across?" The man shook his head. "Not before the next bend west. That'll cost you 2 days and a flooded valley." Mira cupped her hands. "The bridge is broken." "It's not," the man said. "Just incomplete." Rowen frowned. "Can we pass?" The man tilted his head. "Only if you've got a reason." Mira blinked. "A reason to cross?" "No," the man said. "A reason to continue." They stared at him a moment. Then Mira turned to Rowen, voice low. "He's mad." "Or," Rowen said, "he's guarding something." "What?" "The truth." A narrow set of planks had been laid to form a temporary walkway, just wide enough for one person at a time. A makeshift rail ran along one side, tied with rope and stakes. Rowen gestured. "I'll go first." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Afraid I'll fall?" "Afraid we'll both fall at once." She snorted, but let him go. He crossed slowly, feet deliberate, eyes never leaving the man on the far side. The wood creaked but held. When he stepped onto the opposite bank, the man rose. They stood, two figures beneath the birches, one younger, full of questions, the other older, full of silence. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Rowen." "Occupation?" Rowen hesitated. "Then, woodworker." "Mostly." "Then why the blade?" Rowen lifted it slightly. "Because shaping things that don't move started to feel useless." The man nodded. "And why Emberwick?" Rowen exhaled. "I want to learn how to fight." "Why?" Another pause. Then Rowen said quietly, "Because someday, someone might need me to." The old man looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You can pass." Mira was already halfway across. She'd watched it all. Her eyes were focused. Shin high. The man turned to her when she stepped onto the grass. "Name?" "Mira." "Trade?" "Healing. Or trying to." "Why the road?" She didn't hesitate. "Because I'm tired of wondering whether I could have saved them, and I want to know, next time, I can." The man's gaze softened. "And what if there is no next time?" Mira looked past him, toward the bend in the path. "Then I'll still be ready." He smiled faintly, and let her pass. They walked for a while in silence. The path curved beside the river, quieter here, birdsong above, roots twisting beneath their steps. Somewhere upstream, water gurgled softly over stones. After a time, Mira spoke. "You handled him well." "I didn't handle him." "You answered honestly." Rowen shrugged. "You did too." She glanced over. "You don't really seem like a soldier." "I'm not. Yet." He looked at her. And smiled, the first true one since they met. They camped that night on high ground overlooking the river. The moon was thin. The stars were many. Rowen tended the fire while Mira crushed dried mint into their tea. As the steam rose, she asked, "What if he had said no?" Rowen stared into the flame. "I think I would have tried to cross anyway." Mira sipped. "Me too." He looked at her. And for a moment, in the space between danger and destiny, they were not strangers. Just two people who had chosen the same bridge. By mid-morning, the heat had settled into their bones like old truth. The sun pressed low and wide across the road, baking the dirt until it cracked into webbed veins. Their boots left pale ghosts of dust with every step. The trees, where they still stood, were sparse and high, offering more illusion of shade than relief. Mira wrapped a cloth around her neck, already damp. Her braid stuck to the side of her face, sweat catching in the hollow above her collarbone. Rowen said nothing, but his strides had slowed. They hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. The air didn't want words. When they rounded the bend, they found the man. He sat beneath a crooked ash tree, one leg crossed over the other, a wooden basin at his feet filled with water that shimmered from the heat. A shallow table stood beside him, on which lay an array of scissors, razors, brushes, and bottles, not neatly, but intentionally. Every tool looked touched, but none worn out. He wore a patched vest with mismatched buttons, sleeves rolled up, and a wide straw hat that had seen too many seasons. His mustache curled upward like punctuation. Around his waist, a belt brimming with combs, dried flowers, and bits of old ribbon. Above him hung a sign nailed into the tree trunk with a single crooked nail. "Troubles trim, no coin, one trade only." Mira stopped first. Rowen came up beside her, squinting. "That's new." The man didn't look up. "New to you, maybe. I've been here since Regret learned how to walk." Mira laughed under her breath. He glanced their way and grinned. "Welcome, travelers. You look like two stories badly in need of editing." His voice was calm, dry, confident. Not arrogant, just settled. Rowen eyed the blades warily. "You cut hair?" "And burdens," the man said. "Though some are harder to comb." He gestured to a folding stool across from his own. "Have a seat. One at a time." Mira hesitated, then stepped forward. "You always offer this to strangers?" The barber nodded. Strangers make the best customers. No expectations. What's the price? One thing, he said. A memory. Spoken aloud. She tilted her head. You collect them? I keep them, he said. Not for myself. Just so someone remembers. Rowen stayed behind as Mira sat. The stool was low and warm from the sun. A soft breeze moved through the ash branches above, barely enough to flutter a leaf. The barber removed a small comb from his belt, then a thin blade. Do you want change? He asked softly. Or just lightness? Mira swallowed. I want to feel less full. He began brushing gently through her braid. Tell me, he said. Not everything. Just what you carry. She was silent for a moment. Then, there was a girl. 8 years old. Came to my mother's house with a fever. The comb slowed. I mixed the herbs. My mother was away. I thought it was goatweed, but the leaves were longer. Bloodthorn. She breathed slowly. I gave her the wrong brew. The comb paused. She died that night. Her parents buried her with no words. I stayed in the house 3 more days. People didn't blame me out loud, but they stopped coming. The barber said nothing. Only pulled the blade once, a clean snip. She felt a lock fall. Then another. Tiny, deliberate. Like breath. He reached into a jar and placed the clipped strands inside. Then hung the jar from the branch above. That's where I keep the ones who speak with clarity, he said. Mira blinked hard. Thank you? He nodded once. You're not meant to forget her. Just stop wearing her like armor. She rose. Rowen stayed silent as she returned to him. The barber looked his way. You? Rowen shook his head. I'm not ready. The man only smiled. Most aren't. That's fine. But take this. He handed Rowen a soft cloth, no larger than a handkerchief. It smelled faintly of cedar. For wiping down the things you sharpen too often. Rowen pocketed it without a word. They continued walking through the thinning trees. The silence was different now, looser, easier. Mira touched her braid absently. I didn't think it would matter saying it. Did it? I think so. Rowen looked at her. You don't seem lighter. No, she said. But I feel honest. He nodded. And they walked. That evening, they stopped near a shallow stream where birds flickered between low reeds and light drifted like dust. Mira built the fire this time, stacking the kindling with care. Rowen whittled a length of driftwood into a short handle for something unnamed. They didn't eat much. Just flatbread and dried fruit. But they ate together. When the fire began to settle into glowing coals, Mira stirred the embers gently with a stick. He asked me what I wanted to forget, she said. But I think I'm more afraid of what I'll forget on my own. Rowen tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean, she paused then. I want to remember what it felt like to want to help, even if I failed. Rowen didn't answer right away. Then said, That's what'll make you a better healer than the ones who never did. Mira glanced at him, and for the first time, didn't look away quickly. That night, she lay under the open sky, arms behind her head, listening to the water move. And Rowen, watching her from the other side of the fire, finally closed his knife and set down the wood. Not finished. But ready. The road that morning was harder than it had been in days. The sun rose thick and slow behind a smear of white sky. Not hot, not yet, but damp. The kind of damp that clung to clothes and skin, and settled into the fabric of the pack like a weight that didn't belong. Rowen wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist, and adjusted the strap on his shoulder. Mira said nothing, but her steps had shortened. She no longer glanced up at birds or trees. Her gaze had gone narrow and low, boots, path, breath. They passed a wagon wheel, long abandoned in the grass. A rusted horseshoe. A crow picking at something unseen. The road curled into a narrow valley. The air thickened. Then, the smell. At first, faint, soft, yeasty, like dried flour on warm stone. Then deeper, crust browning, apples baking, a sweetness beneath the dust. Mira stopped. You smell that? Rowen nodded. Bread. No. She inhaled, closed her eyes. That's honey bread. With maybe clove? Or sun seeds. You think it's real? Don't care, he said, already moving faster. I'm following it. The scent led them through a stand of hawthorn trees, where a narrow stream glinted in the sun and wild mint grew in lazy patches. And then, the clearing. It wasn't a village. Not exactly. Just a resting hollow, shaped by travelers and time. A few canvas tents leaned into the trees. A circle of stones marked a long-dead fire. But at the center stood a low brick oven, its sides blackened, chimney lopsided but breathing smoke in gentle puffs. Beside it stood a man, broad in the chest, barefoot on the earth, with flour up to his elbows and a round face cracked wide by smile lines. His hair was red blonde and wild. His apron was patched with sown leaves. He was humming to himself. 6 loaves rested on a cloth beside him. Another 3 still baking. 2 cooled in wooden bowls. 1, split open and steaming, sat in his hands. He tore it, handed a half to a girl nearby, and laughed as she tried to hold the hot crust. Mira stopped just inside the clearing. Is he alone? Rowen pointed to the tree line. Not quite. A few others were scattered, a woman with a tired horse, an older couple tending to their packs, a lanky boy scratching words into bark. A sign leaned against a stone beside the oven. Bread from memory, no coin, no rules. Eat what you know. They approached. The baker saw them coming and grinned. Well now, he said. You two look like you've forgotten how to be full. Mira smiled. Is it that obvious? Only to those who bake. He winked. Come. I've got something nearly ready for remembering. He stepped back to the oven, pulled a fresh loaf from the stone with a long paddle, then sliced it with a wooden blade. Steam billowed, warm and sweet. He handed them each a thick piece. Careful. Memory bites. Mira bit first. The taste bloomed instantly, soft, a little sweet, familiar in a way that made her knees wobble. She sat without realizing. Rowen chewed more slowly. His eyes didn't widen, but something in his shoulders changed, softened. It's from when I was small, he said. Same, Mira whispered. They didn't speak for several minutes, just chewed, slowly, eyes far away. When they finished, the baker sat across from them. He didn't ask for stories. Didn't pry. Just said, You heading somewhere? Emberwick, Mira replied. Ah. Southbound souls. He plucked a few mint leaves from a pot beside him and crushed them between his fingers. Lots of you lately. Folk with reasons they don't quite want to say aloud. Rowen looked up. You see many? Most don't stay long. But every now and then, someone comes back. Do you bake for them all? Mira asked. I bake for those who forget how to taste. Later they helped. Rowen gathered wood with the older man who fed the fire. Mira washed herbs and boiled water for tea with a woman who'd lost her voice but not her hands. During the bustle, a small boy fell and scraped his arm on the stones. Mira knelt beside him without thinking, rinsed it, pressed a mint leaf to the scratch, then tied it with a clean ribbon. He didn't cry. Just stared at her. You're not a healer, he said. She paused. Not yet. Still smells like one, he said. She smiled. Near sunset, 2 travelers began arguing over who had more right to the last heel of bread. Rowen, watching from across the fire, stood and stepped between them. No one gets it, he said. Give it to the fire. They stared at him. Fire remembers better than hungry mouths, he added. The baker laughed, handed them each a new slice, and nodded at Rowen. Well said, Iron Hands. Rowen didn't know if it was a compliment, but it felt like one. As the sky turned gold, the baker packed them each a gift. To Mira, he gave a round braid, dark-crusted, laced with herbs and crushed apple, to eat when the road tastes like ash. To Rowen, he handed a flat loaf pressed with an imprint of wheat. Carry this. It's already hard. But it remembers softness. They thanked him. And when Mira tried to leave a coin, he shook his head. Memory has no market, he said. That night, under stars sharper than usual, they camped beneath the pines. Mira unwrapped her bread, took a small piece, then set it near the edge of the fire. For her, she whispered. Rowen didn't ask who. He just looked at his loaf, still warm. Then at his hands, and how they hadn't hurt all day. Before sleep, Mira spoke. If there is no war. Rowen turned. Will this all feel like a waste? He considered. No, he said. Because I'll still have walked this road. And you'll still have healed that boy. And we'll still remember the taste of that bread. She exhaled. Then maybe that's enough. Rowen looked at her, firelight painting her face in orange and gold. Yeah, he said. Maybe it is. The day had started long. They'd woken before the sun finished climbing the treetops, stretched aching backs, eaten cold bread and berries. The road, once lively with scent and breeze, now felt dull beneath their steps. Dust clung to their boots. Their silence was companionable, but heavier than before. Mira kept looking down, her eyes scanning the ground like she was hoping for something to distract her. Rowen walked with his hands clasped behind his back, the way old men did in cities, as if guarding their own thoughts. Then, as the morning light stretched white across the stones, Mira paused. What's that? Rowen followed her gaze. Ahead, the road widened at an old crossroads, a forgotten place where paving stones had been laid long ago and now cracked from time, moss, and wheels that no longer passed. But what stopped them wasn't the road. It was the chalk. Everywhere, along the stones, the cracks, the upright edge of a sun-bleached cart wheel, were drawings. Dozens. No, hundreds. Spirals and lines, stick figures, trees, symbols, arcs. Some childlike. Others oddly precise. Shapes repeating. Names and faces. Flowers that seemed to breathe. At the center of it all sat a boy. Thin, barefoot, legs crossed. Hair the color of faded straw. He held a short piece of blue chalk and moved it along the stone with the steady concentration of someone who didn't care who watched. He looked up as they approached. His eyes were gray, not cold, not warm, just clear. You're late, he said without smiling. Mira blinked. Excuse me? The boy tapped his drawing. You were meant to be here before the second crow. Rowen looked to the trees. We didn't see any crows. Exactly. Mira stepped forward. What are you drawing? He turned the stone toward her slightly. I'm drawing you. She tilted her head. The figure was unmistakably female, long hair, a curved satchel at her hip. Around the figure's hands, small stars had been drawn, like petals or light. And that? She pointed. A medicine wheel, the boy said. But broken. Rowen raised an eyebrow. That's a bit dramatic. The boy shrugged. It's not about now. It's about what you are when you stop hiding. Mira opened her mouth, then closed it. And what about me? Rowen asked, stepping closer. The boy pointed with his chalk to a second figure. Taller. Heavy arms. A straight line from shoulder to fist, ending not in a weapon, but in a handle. Rowen leaned in. What's that? You're holding steadiness, the boy said. You just don't believe it's yours yet. Rowen's expression flickered. You speak like an old man. He muttered. I'm just a boy, the child said. But I've watched 1,000 people pass and most of them don't even look down. They stood there in silence. The wind moved a few blades of grass. Somewhere, a crow cawed, late, apparently. The boy set the chalk down and held out 2 small pieces, one red, one white. You can draw 2 if you want. Mira reached first. She crouched beside him, brushed dust from a clean patch of stone, and began to trace a familiar shape, the curled outline of a leaf, but with veins like rivers. Rowen followed more slowly. He wasn't sure what to draw. Then, without thinking, he outlined a small wooden handle, smooth, rounded, then drew a second line, a hand holding it, steady. The boy watched them both. Then added a final line himself. Between their drawings, a small tree, thin, just sprouting, its roots reaching to touch both. He didn't explain it. He didn't need to. Mira swallowed hard. I haven't drawn anything since I was a girl, she murmured. Rowen looked down. Me either. The boy smiled, faintly. It's not drawing. It's remembering. Before they left, the boy handed them each a piece of chalk. Keep it, he said. If you ever forget what you look like inside, find a stone and try again. Mira crouched and placed a single sprig of thyme beside his drawings. Rowen simply nodded. And they walked on. That night their camp was quiet. They found a small hill with a flat stone just large enough for 2 packs and a fire pit. The stars emerged slow and soft above them. The grass hissed gently when wind passed. They sat shoulder to shoulder, backs against the stone, either speaking. Then Mira broke the silence. When I was little, she said, I used to pretend I was a healer who could fix people by listening. No herbs. No cuts. Just words. Rowen nodded. What changed? I stopped believing words mattered. Rowen poked at the fire. I wanted to be a soldier once. Not for glory. Just so I could be someone my father would believe in. Does he believe in you now? Rowen's jaw tensed. I don't think he ever knew me well enough to try. The fire crackled between them. Mira reached into her pocket, drew out the chalk. I think I might try again tomorrow. Rowen turned toward her. To draw? No, she said softly. To believe. And he smiled, not wide, not sudden, but real. Like something waking up that had slept too long. They slept beside their packs, heads turned slightly toward the stars. And when the wind blew through the grass that night, it whispered not secrets, but promises they hadn't made yet. By their 4th day of walking without a village in sight, even the birds had grown quiet. The road had flattened into long, grassy stretches, broken only by the occasional stone marker, many of them crooked, faded, or half swallowed by weeds. Trees thinned, their shade now a memory. Hills melted into low, slow waves of land. The wind whispered sometimes, but it didn't carry news. Just breath. The silence was not empty. It was full of patience, of heat, of waiting. And still they walked. Mira adjusted her satchel and glanced at Rowen. He looked the same as always, upright, steady, unreadable. But his pace had slowed, and once he paused to stretch his shoulder without a word. Neither had spoken since morning tea. Not out of discomfort. Just, nothing needed saying. Not yet. Around midday, the grass rose taller and thicker, not wild, but unkept. A place that once might have been harvested, or cared for long ago. Now, it swayed and shimmered with the light, painting the fields in bands of green and gold. A small rise appeared ahead, the land curving gently upward. At the crest stood a lone tree, wide-limbed and heavy with pale bark that peeled in long curls. It offered no fruit, no birdsong. Just shade. Beneath it, a ring of stones, low to the ground, half covered in moss. And a silence deeper than the rest. Rowen slowed first. He looked at Mira, and though he said nothing, his expression was clear. Here. This is the place. They climbed the hill together. The tree wasn't ancient, but it felt old. The kind of old that doesn't count in years, but in secrets. Its roots broke through the grass in places, curling like fingers. The stone ring was crumbled, perhaps once a well, or a shrine, or something forgotten. Rowen dropped his pack near it. Mira sat cross-legged in the shade. Neither said a word for a long while. They listened. To wind and grass. To the creak of a branch. To breath. And inside themselves, to something finally loosening. After a time, Mira began laying out her herb pouch, not for use, but for order. She ran her fingers over each bundle, rearranging the leaves, checking the wrappings, as if grounding herself in the routine. Rowen pulled out the wooden spoon he'd been carving. He didn't touch the blade, only traced the soft groove down the center with his thumb. They moved like people who had nothing urgent left to prove. Eventually, Mira broke the silence. This place feels like a question no one wants answered. Rowen glanced up. Or one no one dares to ask. She smiled faintly. You always correct my poetry with logic. It's a terrible habit. She chuckled, then looked back at her herbs. I've been thinking, she said. What if we get to Emberwick, and I'm no good at any of it? Rowen didn't speak for a moment. Then you'll learn. And if I don't, then you'll teach something else. She exhaled slowly. I started this road because I thought learning to heal would fix something in me. Something that broke after. She didn't finish. Rowen nodded. I know. Mira looked up. Do you ever feel like you're chasing something you don't really believe exists? All the time. Then why keep walking? He glanced toward the horizon. Because there's a version of me I haven't met yet. And I think he might be worth the trouble. Mira didn't speak, but her hands stilled. Later, they ate a cold meal, bread gone slightly dry, cheese softened at the edges, and some sweet herbs Mira added for comfort. The tree creaked softly above them. And in that quiet space, Mira said, I miss my mother. Rowen didn't turn. I miss someone I never really knew. They didn't ask each other to explain. The silence was enough. As dusk deepened, they lay in the tall grass side by side, watching light fade across the field. The stars arrived slow, tentative. A crescent moon rose behind thin clouds. Mira turned on her side. If there is no war, she whispered, will you still train? Rowen thought a moment. Yes. Why? Because I want to be the kind of man who doesn't need war to have purpose. She nodded. I want to heal people who aren't dying. Just living. He turned to her now, closer than before. I think you already are. She smiled. Soft. Honest. The kind of smile that doesn't ask to be seen, but is still grateful when it is. They fell asleep without blankets, without fire, without fear. And for the first time in days both dreamt. Not of what had been, but of what still might be. The path grew quieter as the day stretched thin. The trees had given way to open grass, and now even the hills seemed reluctant to rise. Shadows stretched long ahead of their boots, and the road faded from stones into nothing more than memory beneath the green. They hadn't seen another soul in almost 2 days. Just wind. Just sky. Rowen walked ahead, eyes scanning the horizon, but not truly watching. Mira, a few steps behind, dragged her fingers through the tall grass as they passed. Her voice broke the hush. What's that? He turned. Near the edge of the trail, just where the grass dipped around a cluster of stones, something stuck out of the ground. Not a root. Not a rock. Mira crouched, brushed the earth aside. A rusted hinge. Then wood. It's a box, she said, breathless. They dug together, not deep, just enough to loosen it. The soil clung to the edges like it didn't want to let go. The box was no longer strong, but still whole, heavy, but not locked. They sat beside it in the grass. Rowen looked at Mira. Do we open it? She didn't answer with words. She lifted the lid. Inside, paper. Dozens of letters, some bound in ribbon, others loose and folded, all different sizes, colors, inks. The scent of old pages filled the air, dust, time, something sweet and sorrowful. Mira touched the top one gently. No name. No seal. Just folded, waiting. She unfolded it. If I had known the last thing you'd say to me was don't wait up, I might have answered differently. I still wait up. Every night. Rowen reached for another, slower. You taught me how to fish, but never how to stay. I've spent years walking back to the river. It never forgave either of us. Mira blinked fast. These are real. Rowen nodded. They never sent them. They read for a long time. Some letters were short, scribbled notes on scraps of cloth, pressed leaves with writing on the veins. Others were long, methodical, written in careful script. Some were confessions. Some were goodbyes. Some were beginnings that never reached anyone. I forgive you, though you don't deserve it. I think that counts for something. There is a road where we both meant to meet. I still walk it, even if you're no longer coming. I wanted to be kind. I became quiet instead. Mira folded her knees up, arms wrapped tight around them. She whispered, "It's like they left pieces of themselves in here. Just waiting to be found." Rowen didn't speak. He picked up a folded corner of parchment, brittle with age, and read, "I tried being brave for 3 minutes. Then I walked away. But I turned around, and that, I think, is what saved me." They sat without speaking for a while, sunlight shifting across the grass. Then Mira reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, blank page. "What are you doing?" Rowen asked. "I think it's our turn." He hesitated. "To write to who?" She looked down at the letters. "To the person we never got to be." She began to write. Her hand trembled at first, but steadied as ink touched paper. "To the girl I couldn't save. I remember the night you came to my mother's door, fevered and thin. I remember how I reached for the wrong leaf. I remember your eyes closing, and the silence that followed. I told myself it wasn't my fault. But still, I carry you. I don't want to let you go. But I want to stop punishing myself by forgetting. I hope someone held you kindly, even after." Mira. Rowen didn't write. Not at first. He sat with his hand on his knee, staring at the worn edge of a letter tied with green thread. Then, finally, he opened his pack. Inside was the small shaving from the spoon he'd been carving. He turned it over, and with his blade carved into the soft underside. "I'm not who I was. And I'm still afraid of who I might be. But I'm walking." He placed it gently in the box. They sat with the open chest as the sun dipped low, light gilding the rim. Then, one by one, they returned the letters. Mira placed hers near the top. Rowen rested his wood shaving between two folded corners. No fanfare. Before closing the lid, Mira whispered, "We shouldn't bury it again." Rowen nodded. "Let someone else find it." They left it resting by the stone, surrounded by golden grass. A silent archive of hearts that dared to speak, even if no one listened. That night, they made camp under an old birch whose leaves whispered even when the wind didn't move. Mira leaned her head against her pack and said, "I didn't know how much I needed to write that." Rowen nodded. "Sometimes the words don't fix anything, but they stop the rot." She smiled. "That's oddly poetic for a man with a chisel." He looked over. "Even tools have their gentler uses." Before sleep, Mira took out her chalk and drew a single spiral into the dirt beside the fire, the same one she saw on one of the letters earlier that day. Not to explain. Not to understand. Just to remember. And Rowen, eyes on the stars, whispered quietly, "I hope someone finds it. Someday." The world turned gold again. It was late afternoon when Mira and Rowen crested a long, sun-baked hill. Their shadows stretched behind them like silent threads, winding through the green fields they had crossed since morning. The road had vanished hours ago, leaving only instinct and sky. Then they saw her. A figure sat alone beneath a wide cypress tree at the hill's base, where the earth folded gently into shade. Around her, dozens of strands of dried grass, reeds, and strips of pale bark were woven into wide spirals laid flat on the ground. She worked slowly, deliberately, fingers braiding blades together into long, tangled curves. Not fabric. Not rope. Maps. Mira slowed first. Rowen followed, squinting into the light. As they approached, the woman looked up. Her face was lined but not old, her eyes bright but not young. She wore a mantle woven from many green fibers, and her hair fell like frost over her shoulders. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, not unkindly. Mira tilted her head. "You were expecting us?" "No," she smiled. "But I was hoping." The braided spirals spread like roots around her. Each one bore its own pattern, paths, forks, coils, waves, all stitched in reeds, flower stalks, and bent blades of wild grass. Some glimmered faintly in the setting sun. Rowen took a cautious step forward. Are these maps? She nodded. Every night I weave what I see in my sleep. Places. Paths. The way ahead, as someone might need it. Mira knelt beside her, examining the nearest spiral. And in the morning? They fade, she said. The wind takes them. So I begin again. They stood a while, just watching her work. Then she gestured to a fresh weave near her knee. This one is for you. She didn't say which of them. They both stepped closer. The pattern showed two paths winding southward. One was long and arched, passing through highland marks, slow loops, broken stones. The other cut straight through what seemed to be a valley, quick, clean, almost sharp. A small symbol, like a curled fern, stood where the two lines split. Mira asked softly, "What does this mean?" "It's where you must choose," the woman replied. "Not left or right. Not better or worse. But what kind of time you want to carry." Rowen frowned. "That's cryptic. Isn't all travel?" They sat with her as the light dimmed and her fingers kept weaving. She spoke little more. Sometimes she hummed under her breath. The wind moved her hair like grass. Mira traced the longer route on the woven spiral. "I want to follow this one." Rowen looked at her. "It'll add days." "I know. Rough terrain. I still want to." He sat straighter. "But you said Emberwick might close its gate by late fall." She nodded. "It might." Rowen stared at the map. "I was hoping to train by winter." There was no anger between them, but there was resistance. Mira looked down. "You can take the shorter path." "I don't want to stop you," Rowen replied. "I didn't think we were going to split." She looked at him. "Neither did I." They were quiet. Then the mapmaker spoke. "You both want the same place. But maybe not for the same reason." That night, the woman gave them each a leaf-wrapped bundle. Inside, smaller spiral maps made of twisted twine and dried stems. One for Mira. One for Rowen. "They're not identical," she said. "But they're true." Mira opened hers by the firelight. Her path was slow, with resting points. Circles of reflection. A symbol for water. Rowen's was lean. Direct. But it bent once, halfway through, a mark for pause, she guessed. They exchanged maps, studied them, then gave them back. Rowen sat still, staring into the coals. "I don't want to walk behind you," he said. "Or ahead of you. I want to walk with you," Mira whispered. "Then maybe the path doesn't matter." He looked at her. "You sure?" "No," she said honestly. "But I want to try." They agreed to take her road, Mira's. Longer. Wilder. Less known. Not because it was safer, but because it was shared. Before bed, Mira whispered to the mapmaker. "How do you know what to weave?" The woman replied. "I don't weave what's true. I weave what's possible." Then added, "You were both always going to choose the same thread. You just needed time to see it." In the morning, the woman was gone. No trace. No fiber. No reed. Just grass pressed in circles. And two maps. Still warm from hands that believed in tomorrow. The sun was sinking when they saw it. Emberwick. Not a fortress. Not a city of towers. Just a cluster of rooftops nestled among low green hills, chimney smoke curling like silk into the gold-washed sky. Lanterns flickered in the distance. The faint outline of a bell tower caught the last rays of light. It didn't look like destiny. It looked like arrival. Mira slowed first, one hand on her chest. Rowen stopped beside her, squinting into the setting sun. They stood without speaking, just breathing, long and low, as if the silence had weight. The wind shifted. It smelled of wood smoke, lavender, and bread. Mira whispered, "It's smaller than I imagined." Rowen nodded. "It's more real than I imagined." She smiled softly. They didn't walk down. Not yet. Instead, they veered toward a nearby ridge, where the grass grew long and amber. A single twisted tree leaned toward the valley like it had spent its whole life watching travelers arrive. There, they unrolled their blankets and sat with their backs against a flat stone warmed by the sun. No one spoke for some time. The wind rustled the grass. The sky faded to blush, then indigo. Mira reached into her pack and drew out a folded paper, thicker than most, sealed with a simple tie of twine. Rowen noticed. She hesitated, then handed it to him. He unfolded it carefully, like something fragile. Mama, if this reaches you, it means I made it. I stood on the ridge and saw Emberwick for the first time. And it felt quiet, but good. I still carry the girl's name, Len, and the guilt that came with her. But it doesn't crush me now. You taught me how to stitch a wound. I just didn't know, until now, that it also applies to the soul. There are people here who might teach me how to heal better. But I already learned something deeper, how to listen when there's no answer. I love you. And I hope, one day, I can return not just wiser, but lighter. Mira. Rowen read it twice. Then looked at her. You could have sent this weeks ago. I wasn't ready to mean it yet. He nodded. Then looked at his own pack. After a long pause, he reached into it and pulled out a blank page. He hadn't written in years. Not for himself. Not to anyone. He stared at the empty space until the stars came out. Then, slowly, he began. Father, I've walked farther than you said I could. I've learned more than you thought I would. But I still carry your hands in mine, your shape, your steadiness. You taught me precision, discipline, strength. But not how to forgive. I had to learn that from others. If the war comes, I'll fight. If it doesn't, I'll build. Both will be acts of service. I think you would understand that now. There's a girl here, not mine but near. She sees me clearer than I see myself sometimes. That scares me. But it also feels like something worth staying for. I won't ask for pride. Just for your quiet peace. Rowen. He didn't read it aloud. But Mira watched his face as he wrote, and something in his shoulders loosened, not collapsed, not defeated, but released. They sat side by side again, watching the lights of Emberwick begin to glow. Mira whispered, "What do you think it'll be like?" Rowen didn't answer at first. Then, "I think it'll feel like starting over. But with tools we didn't have the first time." She nodded. "I'm not afraid of failure anymore." He looked at her. "What are you afraid of then?" She smiled faintly. "That I might actually belong." He thought about that. Then said, "I'm afraid the war won't come." Mira's brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because if it doesn't, what if we did all this for nothing?" She was quiet. Then placed a hand gently over his. "Or maybe we did all this, so we'd be ready to build something better." The wind shifted again. Colder now. But not cruel. Rowen folded his letter and placed it under a stone beside hers. They didn't bury them. Just left them resting. Not discarded, but released. Later, as they lay wrapped in cloaks, Mira whispered into the night. "If I'm ever needed to leave this place, I think I'll be able to." Rowen turned to her. "Because you're stronger?" "Because I finally want to stay." He didn't reply. But a moment later, his hand found hers beneath the blanket. Not tightly. Just enough. They fell asleep to the sound of wind in the grass and the far-off hush of a place that wasn't home yet. But might be. They arrived at dawn. No gatekeeper awaited them. No fanfare. No ceremony. Just the hushed breath of a waking town, mist curling over the cobbled paths, windows glowing faintly from lanterns within. Emberwick. It looked nothing like Rowen imagined. And yet everything Mira had hoped for. They paused on the final ridge. Below, the town rested in a quiet cradle of earth. Houses with sloped roofs, chimney smoke lifting like ribbons, gardens coiled with lavender and thyme. There was no fortress. No wall. Just a rhythm of life that pulsed softly, steadily. Rowen exhaled. "It's small." Mira smiled. "It's real." They descended in silence. Down into streets worn smooth by years, past bakeries still yawning open, past children carrying baskets twice their size. A cat stretched in the sun. A blacksmith opened his shutters with one hand and waved with the other. The town didn't stare. It simply welcomed. They found the inn, the Sparrow's Nest, tucked between a weaver's shop and a sleepy green fountain. It smelled of chamomile and old wood. The owner gave them 2 rooms, keys tied with red thread. They didn't ask for one. They didn't need to. Mira washed first. The basin water steamed, infused with mint leaves. She let the warmth draw out the ache in her shoulders, in her back, in places she hadn't realized were still holding weight. She wept. Not from pain, but relief. And let herself laugh after. Rowen stood in his room, staring at his hands. He still didn't know what they were meant to do, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to find out. Across the square, a forge opened. He watched the apprentices sweep the floor. The master lit the coals. He didn't move. Not yet. That afternoon, Mira wandered the garden path behind a pale blue gate. Vines hung from archways. The smell of yarrow and lemon balm curled through the air. At the entrance to the healer's house stood a carved sign. If you seek to learn, knock twice. If you seek to teach, knock once. If you are unsure, sit in the garden. She sat. For an hour. Then knocked. Twice. Rowen found the training yard by accident. There was no grand building, just a field lined with smooth stones and a circle worn into the earth. A few people practiced, some awkwardly, some with grace. An old man with a cane watched. Rowen approached. I want to learn, he said. The man raised a brow. Then begin, he replied. With listening. The weeks came gently. And then months. Mira learned the pulses of different fevers. She learned how to keep her hands steady when children trembled. She bandaged feet, stitched wounds, brewed tea for grief, and sometimes just sat beside someone who needed quiet. One night, a woman gave birth on a floor of blankets while thunder rolled outside. Mira stayed the whole night. And in the morning she sang. Rowen trained harder than most. He failed often. But he learned to fail quietly, and to rise even quieter. He became a guide to those younger, those who flinched or fell or tried too hard. He taught them that strength was never in the strike, but in the stillness before it. They ate together often, on stone steps by the garden wall, in silence. Sometimes they spoke of dreams. Sometimes they didn't. But when they parted each evening, they did so with peace. Because the road no longer led away from something. It led with them. And the war? It never came. Not to Emberwick. The kings who once postured at borders laid down ink instead of steel. And the town kept breathing. 1 year after their arrival, Mira and Rowen returned to the hill. The ridge. Where it all began. The grass was taller. The tree broader. The stones beneath their feet more settled. They sat. Mira placed a hand on the ground, as if to thank it. Rowen took out a folded carving, a small figure of a woman holding herbs. He placed it beneath the roots of the tree and said nothing. What would you have said to your past self? Mira asked softly. If you'd met him here a year ago? Rowen smiled. I'd have told him he was never too late to start again. She nodded. I'd have told her she was already enough. They sat long after the sun fell. Not planning. Not regretting. Just being. And when the stars came out, they stood, turned toward the town, and walked down, not as travelers, but as those who had already arrived. Thank you for joining us on the road to Emberwick. May your dreams be calm, your path steady, and your spirit rested. If this story brought you peace, please consider subscribing to Deep Sleep Story. Until next time, sleep well.